Hi everyone, Laurel here, and today I'm going to be making a card that showcases some acrylic block watercoloring. And this is the card that I'm going to be making. Actually, it's for the landscaping challenge this week, which is all about watercoloring. So I thought I would show you how I made this card here. So I'm using some Fawn products. I'm using the Baked with Love stamp set and also the coordinating die. And I'm going to make a very clean and simple card here, focusing mostly on the watercoloring here, since that's the theme of the challenge. So I'm grabbing the little cake stand here and also the cupcake, and I'm kind of eyeballing the set to see if I wanted to put anything else on that cake stand, and I decided I just wanted to keep it very simple. So I'm going to pick up those images with an acrylic block, and I'm going to ink them up with some Fawn ink. It's a dye ink in the color Hippo. It's the first time I've ever used their ink before, and I have to say I like it. It really stamps very well, and it's also waterproof. So now I'm taking this fun shaped block here with these curved edges, and I'm inking up the block with some distress ink. Because distress inks are formulated to react with water, I thought this would be a good medium to use. So I'm using Cracked Pistachio, Barn Door, and this is Dusty Concord. So I've got a red, a green, and a purple here, and I'm just putting it directly onto my acrylic block here. And then I'm going to take some water and I'm going to mist that block. Now I am working off of watercolored cardstock. I don't think I mentioned that before. I'm working off of Tim Holtz watercolored cardstock. And I'm just spritzing my acrylic block pretty good with some water until you see little water bubbles build. And then I'm going to stamp that directly down onto my watercolor cardstock. You could probably do this with regular cardstock, but I think you're going to get better results with the watercolor cardstock. So I left that acrylic block there for a good 10 seconds or so to make sure the water had time to seep into the watercolor paper there. And then you get that really pretty outline of that acrylic block. So I'm going in and kind of moving the card around. I've got a very damp wet wipe there. I'm kind of bringing out some of those petals and just kind of cleaning up a little bit. And then I'm going to go in, and because these are distress inks and they're formulated to react with water, I can go in and do this and do some water flicking. So I'm just putting some water into my fingers and flicking it down onto that watercolor there. And you can see it's already starting to respond to that water. You can see those watercolored splotches there. So I'm going to go ahead and dab that up with cloth. And then you can see those watercolor splotches, the looks that you get from that. And you'll get a better look of that in just a minute. Now I'm also going to watercolor in my images with these distress inks as well. Now you can use any kind of inks that you want to with this, or any kind of watercolors that you have. Even dye inks. You can even watercolor with your dye inks by basically smooshing it down into a slick surface such as an acrylic block or a craft mat or anything slippery, and adding a little bit of water to it. You can do some watercoloring with that. I've done it with the Fawn Hippo ink. I tried it out and it worked very well. But I'm using distress inks because I like the colors and they blend real well together. So this is the color Peacock Feathers here that I'm coloring in that cake stand with. I've also going to be using some bundled sage, some spun sugar, and some tea dye. I'm using the minis. I have the complete set of minis, which is nice for me because I have colors that I didn't have in the full set. Like I didn't have that spun sugar in the full set. I'm sorry my head keeps getting in the way. I didn't know I didn't have my camera positioned where my bouffant head wouldn't be all up in your business. Sorry about that. So as you can see, I'm just squishing the color down into my acrylic block, and then I'm going in with a wet brush. For the cake stand, I added the water to the cake stand first and then went in and added the color. And for the rest of the images, I just went ahead and went in with the watercolor direct to the paper. So once that's dried, I'm using the coordinated dies here. You can see how easily they break apart. You get them all connected like that, and it's very easy to break it apart. I've adhered the dies with some surgical tape. Any kind of non-porous tape will work, painter's tape, washi tape, anything like that that's not super sticky. And then I've run that through my die cutting machine off camera. I use the Vagabond. I die cut the little heart from the stamp set, but I don't end up using it, but it's still super cute. So this is some gray cardstock, and this is for my sentiment here. I thought it matched well with the hippo. I also could have made my own hippo colored cardstock by just swiping that hippo ink pad onto some white cardstock, but I had this gray cardstock in my stash and it matched good. So I went ahead and inked that up with a pigment ink. It's a white pigment ink by Hero Arts. And then I sprinkled on some white embossing powder. Because I'm using a pigment inks stay wet longer, so you're able to do some super quick embossing. So now it's time to go ahead and assemble my little cake stand on my little watercolor block background there. So I've got some little foam squares here. I'm just cutting to fit the back of my pedestal here, my little cake stand. And I'm going to pop up all of these elements of the card. So I'm going to go ahead and apply that cake stand down there first, and then I realized, I probably need to go ahead and adhere this to my card base before I move further. It's harder to adhere things to card bases when you have a lot of dimension. I wanted to trim down my watercolor cardstock a little bit, so I'm going to take a little bit off of each side. So my cardstock is going to end up being 4 inches wide by 5.5 long. So I'm going to go ahead and add my adhesive. I'm using the Glue Glider Pro here to the back of my watercolored panel. And then I'm going to center that up to where I have the left and the right. You see I have a little bit of that gray border shining through, which ties in with that hippo ink color that we used to stamp the images. So now it's time to go ahead and pop that up. I used 2 pieces of foam tape here for the cupcake, so I got double the dimension for the cupcake here. So all that's nice and popped up. And now I've got to figure out where I want to put my sentiment. So I didn't know if I wanted it at the bottom, if I wanted it to overlap on my little cake stand. I didn't know what I wanted. So it took me a few minutes to figure that out, so I spared you the process of showing you that. So I'm going to make a little banner tail here by just taking my scissors and I cut a slit down the middle, and then I cut into diagonal slits to create that little V shape. So I made a little banner here, and I'm kind of centering off. I did a little cruddy job of cutting my strip there straight. So I decided I wanted it to overlap onto the cake stand here. So I've got some multi-matte medium. I'm just gonna squirt some out there in the middle of that cake stand, and believe it or not, that little tiny bit of glue is gonna hold the sentiment strip. It's never going to come off. This is some strong glue. It's multi-matte medium by Ranger. It's great, and it also is a matte finish, so I use it for almost everything. So I wanted to add a little bit of pattern, so I'm using this Shape and Tape in black. It's basically big, huge pieces of washi tape. So it's got an adhesive back, so I just trimmed it down and I pulled off the adhesive backing there and I layered it across the top of my card, and I'm just trimming off any of the excess that's hanging off the card from the top and the sides. I just love that stuff, and it comes in all these different patterns. I decided I did not want it to overlap onto the gray base there because it's it's kind of translucent, you could see through. So I'm just taking a craft knife and kind of removing that little bit of the washi tape off the sides there. So I thought that looked good. Nice. And now it's time to add a little bit of color. This is the Wink of Stella glitter pen in pink. So I scribbled some of that down onto my craft sheet, and I'm picking it up with a wet paintbrush, kind of making that into my own watercolor. And then I decided to just go in direct here and paint. Then I've got a little I got a cup of water off to the side there. So I'm just blending that with a wet paintbrush. So you can watercolor with your Wink of Stellas too. So it's got a nice sparkle, a nice glisten, but I wanted it a little bit lighter after all, so I'm kind of dabbing some of that away, and it still leaves this really incredible shine because of that Wink of Stella. So that's it. That's the card. This is watercolor, acrylic block watercoloring is what I'm calling it. And again, this is for the current landscaping challenge. If you're interested in any of the supplies or any more information, please head on over to my blog at laurelbeard.org. Have an awesome day.